It's so crazy to think that just 8 weeks ago I was in the mode of waiting for baby, not knowing what to expect about labor and delivery, not knowing how he would be, how he would fit into our family. But 8 weeks passed like nothing, and here we are with the newest addition to our family. Before my memory fades too quickly, I'm going to recap the whole labor and delivery story and the whole adventure of welcoming this little boy into our world. Let me start out by saying that never in a million years did I imagine that the whole labor and delivery process would take as long as it did.
You are so silly. What are you talking about over there?
So let's rewind a little bit and go back to when I was 39 weeks and 6 days pregnant. That was the day I had my final doctor's appointment, prenatal checkup type thing. So we went into the doctor's office and she reassured me that baby was so low as he had been for the last month and a half pretty much. She checked me again. I was still 1 centimeter dilated and everything was looking good. I was pretty hopeful that I would be going into labor within that week, but we decided to schedule an induction for the day I would turn 41 weeks, just to make sure that that was already lined up in case I didn't go into labor naturally, and we just wanted to have that ready to go. So I was hoping that because it was scheduled, we wouldn't need it. I would just be able to cancel it, call it good. But my due date rolled around the next day, still nothing. A full week went by, still nothing, and it was time to call the hospital and see if I could go in for the scheduled induction. The plan was that I would call at 6 p.m. that night, July 5th, and just see what their availability was for beds, how busy they were, all that stuff. So I waited all day, tried to kill time, got my nails done with my mom, was just doing stuff around the house, feeling super emotional, obviously, and just was kind of a mess. But I was really excited and really hopeful that that day was going to be the day that we really got things started, and that potentially the next day we would meet our baby. Bless you. Cutest sneezes. I digress. So I called at 6 p.m. and they were like, yeah, we're super slammed, so call us at 9:30 and we'll see what we can do. And I was like, oh, are you kidding me? I've been so anxious about this all day. How did I know that they would tell me, nope, sorry, call us later? So I wasn't really feeling hopeful that we would go in that night, because apparently there was just this rush of babies being born in that time frame. I don't know what it was, if it was post 4th of July craziness or what, but the hospital was super busy and I just wanted to push out my baby. But there were other people that were actually in active labor in front of me, so I had to wait, obviously. Anyways, so called again at 9:30 and they were like, yeah, we're still super busy, but you can come in, we'll check you, because the plan was that if they couldn't take me in that night, they would just hook me up, monitor me for a little bit just to make sure everything was still looking good, because that's what they would do at my 41-week prenatal checkup anyways. So went into the hospital, we had our bags in the car, but I didn't bring anything in because I was like, yeah, there's no way they're gonna check us in, whatever. So we go in, and we had to wait in the waiting room for a little bit until they got our room ready for us, and then they come out and they're like, all right, let's go, let's check you in. And we're like, oh, so we are staying? And they're like, oh yeah, you're staying, you're gonna have a baby. And I was like, all right, well, I won't complain about that. But mentally I was kind of like, oh, I'm not prepared mentally to be in the hospital now. I was kind of hoping to go home, but it was probably for the best that I was planning on going home, because I would have been even more of an emotional wreck leaving the house, leaving the cats, and just being in that mindset of next time we come home, we're gonna have a baby with us. So we got checked in and they gave us our room, and it happened to be the best room in the whole maternity suite of the hospital, which I was so surprised by too, because I thought they were wicked slammed, and they totally were. But I guess God knew we were going to be there for a long freaking time. So we got the primo room at the hospital and had an awesome view, and it was just great. So around 11 p.m. that night, July 5th, was when we got the whole induction process started with Cervidil. The nurse put that in at 11 and gave me just something to help me sleep. And the plan was just to kind of let it run its course overnight, and then in the morning they would take it out and we would see where we were at. So unfortunately, the Cervidil didn't do as much magic as I thought it was going to do. However, by the time they took it out at around 6 a.m. the following morning, my cervix was about completely thinned out, which that was good, but I was still only 1 centimeter dilated, and baby was a -1 station. So at that point, I was starting to have some contractions, very mild contractions. But I did get my hopes up a little bit, thinking, hey, I got this in the bag, contractions aren't that bad. Who was I kidding? I had no idea what was coming. Alright, let's see how much time we have to get through the rest of the story. So because the hospital was so busy and there was just so many people having babies while we were there, I really wasn't on the top of the priority list for tending to, caring for. I mean, that sounds terrible, but there were people in active labor and they were ready to push. So people on the floor were rather tied up with those people who were actually like needing them. But me, since I was kind of progressing very slowly, kind of just hanging out, things took a little bit longer to get attention, I would say. So I didn't actually get put on Pitocin until 11 a.m. So I waited from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. to finally start phase 2 of the whole induction process. So when they started me on Pitocin, they started me at the lowest dose, which is 1 milliunit, I think, per minute, something, or per hour, I don't know, 1 milliunit, so a very, very small dosage. And I remember the nurse coming in saying, she's like, because the baby's so low, because your cervix is pretty much thinned out, I'd be surprised if you got up to a 4 milliunit dosage, because your body's like, you know, geared up, ready to go. It's just a matter of getting it started. Obviously, she jinxed the situation, because I ended up getting up to, I believe, 20 milliunits. They kept upping the dosage of the Pitocin every half hour or so. So by about 2 o'clock, I was up to 4 milliunits. At that point, I was starting to get more contractions. Nothing that was super painful, just uncomfortable, I would say, but nothing that was like made me stop moving or anything like that. I tried to be up and about as much as I could. I even tried bouncing on a ball for a little bit, just anything to help things keep moving, because things were just going so slowly. At 2:30, they checked me and they said that I was 1.5 centimeters dilated. And honestly, I think that half centimeter that they gave me was out of pity, because nothing was really happening, and they kind of felt bad for me because I had been in the hospital since 9:30, 10 o'clock the night before. So I think they were just giving me that little smidge of hope that things were actually moving along, even though things were barely moving along. By 6 p.m. I was up to 12 milliunits, and that's when the doctor came in and was kind of like, all right, this is the deal. We got to do something to help you move along because things are going so slowly. They even threw out the suggestion of, you know, we could disconnect you from everything. You could go home for the night. You could get a good night's sleep. But at that point, I was like, I'm already invested in being here and giving birth to this baby. Like, I don't want to go home feeling discouraged, like everything failed and my body's just not doing what it's supposed to do, and just feel defeated in that way. I'm like, we're already here. Let's just keep pushing because I just need to get this baby out. So at that point, the doctor stripped my membranes, which was probably like one of the most painful things about the whole process. I did not expect it to be that painful. I don't know if it was just the way he did it, But I was like almost in shock by how much that hurt. So basically I had to put my hands under my butt and open up, get ready. He counted to 3, and then he said, all right, this is going to take just a couple seconds, just, you know, breathe. The nurse was standing right there next to me, and oh my gosh, just, I don't even know how to explain it without being like super graphic, but he just like had his hand in there and was just like going to town, trying to clear things out, I guess. Whew, that hurt so bad. And afterwards I was just like laying there like quiet with my eyes closed, like holy crap, that better have done something, because that was so painful. I hope it was worth it. At that point we also discussed other options. Threw out a couple suggestions, such as putting the balloon in to help things expand, stopping the Pitocin and doing something called misoprostol, which was another medication that was supposed to help just things progress. But we were going to wait and see what happened with just contractions and dilation and stuff like that after the membranes were swept. So we didn't want to do anything too soon. But by 11 p.m. there was really still nothing new happening. I was getting contractions about as regularly as I was since I had started the Pitocin, but nothing that was really extreme, nothing that I felt like I was really going into active labor. I was still just trying to get over that hump of getting dilated to a certain point so that things would really kick into gear. By 11 p.m. I was up to 14 millunits for the dosage of the Pitocin, and that's when the doctor came in and was like, all right, let's start this next phase. And we opted to do the misoprostol. So I had to stop the Pitocin to get on that, and then I had to get the dosages of the misoprostol throughout the night. So I had to do 1 pill every 4 hours. So I was able to get some more sleep that night, but not a ton because it was interrupted. But it was still good to get some rest. And it was good because this misoprostol was the good decision to do because it actually helped things move along. So Saturday morning rolled around and there was still a lot of waiting. I didn't end up being checked again until about 11 a.m. So it was really frustrating because I had the last dosage of the misoprostol at 7. And I was getting contractions, like very mild ones, without the Pitocin, so that was a good sign, but it was still nothing major. So when the doctor came in, he checked me, and at that point I was 3 centimeters, which, hey, that's like major progress because I was sitting at like 1 centimeter for months. So to be at 3 centimeters, I was just so thankful that things were actually moving along. And at that point, because I was 3 centimeters, there was no need to do the balloon because it basically put it in and then it would fall right out because I was to that point where the balloon really wouldn't do much. So they swept my membranes again, and this time it wasn't nearly as painful. Oh my god, thankfully, because I was so scared. But it was a good sign that I was already more dilated than I had been and that things were starting to move along. So they put me back on the Pitocin around 12:30, and that's when things really started to kick into gear. So at 3 p.m. the doctor came back in, checked me again. I was still only 3 centimeters, but at this point there was enough room where he could get in there and try to break my water. Now that was another thing that surprised me, I guess, because I just envisioned when your water breaks, just this huge gush of water, but for me that was not the case because baby was so low. The doctor referred to his head kind of like as a cork in there because he was able to get in there and kind of like nick the sac so that, you know, water could come out, but because baby's head was so low, he was blocking any water from really coming out. So the doctor really wasn't sure if he broke my water fully or what. So again, it was kind of just a matter of waiting to see what happened. But at that point, I could tell that he did something because that's when contractions really started to get painful, and I started to really understand why labor is such a big deal and it's not for wimps. Almost immediately after he nicked the sac and like technically broke the water, I started to feel so much more pressure and the contractions got so much stronger. Now I was still on the Pitocin, so that really helped keep things moving along, but almost immediately, like within a half hour, I was like, okay, like I'm gonna need something. I cannot handle this without the drugs. I didn't want to get an epidural right away because I wanted to still be able to be up and moving because things had been progressing so slowly. I didn't want to be tied to the bed for who knows how long, you know. So I just had no idea. So I had a couple options for like an injection through the IV of pain medication. So I forget which one I ended up doing, but like immediately I felt like I drank like a whole bottle of wine. Like I remember the nurse as she was putting it in, she was like, you're probably gonna feel like you just drank a full bottle of wine. And I was like, yeah, I feel it already. And from that point on, like I was in a total daze. Like I still felt all the pain of the contractions, but I was so out of it, just so loopy, which I really didn't like. I don't really know what I would do next time around, if I would opt to do the pain medication again before getting the epidural or what, because I hate feeling loopy. I hate feeling out of it. But at least I could be up. I was able to get in the tub. I sat in the tub for, I want to say like 2 hours. I had the jets going some of the time, but most of the time I was just sitting in there, just riding out the contractions as they got stronger and stronger. And I remember like my husband went out to get food and he was like so hesitant to leave me, but I was like, no, go now. Like if you're gonna leave, like leave now and come back, because things are just gonna get crazier. So he came back and he brought French fries, and so I was like eating French fries in the bathtub, like totally out of it, like wasted basically. That's my cue. Okay, I'm back. I think I got him back to sleep. All right, so what was I saying? French fries in the bathtub, feeling wasted. Yeah, so things are obviously still progressing pretty quickly for the most part. But then something kind of scary happened. So I was hooked up to the wireless monitor still, and so I could sit in the bathtub and they could still monitor my contractions, monitor the baby, all of that. So that was pretty cool. But all of a sudden the nurse comes in pretty quickly, and I remember I was like trying to sit up a little bit more because I was thinking about getting out of the tub because I'd been in there for a while. And she comes in and she's like, all right, what's going on? And I mean, obviously I was like, felt super drunk, so I was like, just getting up. And she was trying to adjust the monitor that was monitoring the baby because they had lost the baby's heart rate, and so she was able to find it, but the baby's heart rate had dropped a bit more than they'd like to see, so they wanted me to get back into bed. And so they hooked me up to the wire monitors again because the battery ones were dying. And I got back in bed, and at that point I was just in so much more pain. I was like, I think I need the epidural. I don't know if I can do this. And I remember how strong the contractions were at that point, and I remember just finally understanding, like, oh my gosh, this is why people are like, give me the epidural right away, because when you get to the point of just not having a break between contractions and they're just so strong and so long, it is just exhausting. So at that point, I think the first round of pain medication was wearing off, but I was still so just like out of it because of the pain I was in. I still felt super loopy. And so thankfully they were able to get me the epidural pretty quickly. They had a guy that was on the floor, so I didn't have to wait for hours for him to come in and give me the good stuff. He was just finishing up with one person, so I think within like 15 minutes or so he was able to come in and do the epidural, which is a whole other story, but I will get there. So I got the epidural. I remember like sitting on the edge of the bed and had to sign the waiver, and he was like telling me stuff, and honestly I could barely even keep my eyes open. I was just trying to like push through the pain with my eyes closed. I didn't even want my husband to touch me. I was just like, don't even like touch me, like, oh, hey girl. Whenever the baby's sleeping, the cats are just like so desperate for my attention. It's really pathetic. Oh my god, I'm telling a story, girl.
Let me finish.
So yeah, with that pain, I was just so out of it, and got the epidural, and I know on my right side it started to work immediately, but I still could feel like everything on my left side. So they got me back lying down, and the nurse helped to prop me up a little bit so that I was leaning more towards the left, so that things would kind of like drain into the left side and numb me out on both sides. So that helped a lot, and I think within a half hour I fell asleep. So we're probably talking about 8 p.m. or so at this point. And I fell asleep and felt pretty good. And I was like so thankful that I decided to get the epidural, because I don't think I could have done it without it. I can't imagine pushing through that pain any longer than I did. So props to the people that do it without any medication, because that pain was just out of this world. Like, you truly don't know how strong you are until you go through that pain. And I also think you truly don't know how strong you are until you push a baby out, because I had never felt more weak in my life than when I was pushing. Like, and I'm a strong person. I've always been very athletic. I'm very competitive. And I'm never really in a mode where I feel like I need to give up. But I was at my breaking point. I felt like I couldn't do it. But I'm jumping ahead of myself here. So I slept for a while. I remember like Batman was on the TV, and I woke up and I was kind of like watching the monitor, seeing what was happening, and no one had come in and checked me. So no one had checked me since they broke my water, because they said that they don't really like to check you once your water's broken, because it can increase the risk of infection, stuff like that. So in my mind, thinking now, I definitely think I was in the transitional stage of labor during when I was getting my epidural, because I was just in so much pain. I felt like the contractions were never ending, like I never had a break. I was still on Pitocin, mind you. So then when like 10 o'clock, 10:30 rolls around, the doctor and the nurse finally come back in, because they had been monitoring the monitors out in the lobby, and they were kind of just like, things aren't really looking like they should, like contractions are kind of slowing down, this is just kind of weird, we want to check and see what's going on. So they checked me again, and at that point the doctor was like, you are 10 centimeters, baby is +2 station, it is time to go. So I was pretty excited to know that I had made it to that point. I was fully dilated finally. I never thought I would get there, because I sat at 1 centimeter for so long. And so it was really exciting to know, like, all right, it was go time. So the nurse came in and she's like, all right, we're gonna do a couple practice pushes. So she kind of just propped me up a little bit, and she told me what to do, where to push. She kind of like had her hands where I needed to push so that I could feel what I needed to do. And I was kind of surprised by how much I could feel, even though the epidural was still in. I think at that point it was starting to wear off a little bit. I know I had seen some other videos and stuff where people had a button that they could push if they felt like it was starting to wear off, but I feel like the dosage of my epidural was very low, because I could still move my legs, I could still feel a lot of pressure, I just couldn't feel pain, I just felt numb. So it was good. I was able to push and feel how I was pushing, so I think that definitely helped, but it did not help to speed up how long it took for me to push. I ended up pushing for 3 hours. I started actively pushing at 10:45, and thankfully the doctor was in there the whole time, and I mean, I was surprised by how uneventful the whole pushing thing was, because it was like I would push and then there would be like a long break waiting for the next contraction to come through, and once the next contraction started I would push like 3, sometimes 4 times. But then again, it was just waiting, because the contractions were kind of like all over the place. So I was pushing for a long time, and I was surprised that the doctor was in there the whole time too. But I'm very glad he was, because I credit that to why I didn't tear, because he was in there the whole time helping to kind of stretch things out, helping to position the baby's head, just really helping to guide the process, so I wasn't just pushing to push, like he was really trying to move things along. So I'm very, very thankful about that. But so I'm pushing, and towards the end, I felt like we were getting into a better rhythm of understanding how my contractions were coming, where I would feel like they were building, but I had to just hold off on pushing even though I felt like I needed to push, because the contractions were so long and they would just build so slowly. So once we got into the rhythm of waiting until I was at the peak of the contraction before I started pushing, I was able to get like 3 or 4 pushes in that would really help things move along without using too much of my energy in those first like urges to push, I guess. So probably around midnight, it was pretty funny because we were talking to the doctor throughout the whole thing because it was like so laid back and chill. It was so funny. But my husband's mother's birthday was July 7th, and it was July 7th at that time, and we were just so close to it being July 8th. So we were joking with the doctor, like, all right, we gotta wait till July 8th, like we want him to have his own birthday. And the doctor was like, well, if you want me to fudge it a little bit, I could probably give you like 15 minutes on either side. So like, you know, it was just so laid back until about midnight or so, and that's when, you know, I was just like, I'm so over pushing, I'm so tired, I just want this baby to be out of me, I want to meet him already. So I was really trying to like dig deep and just like really make every push worthwhile. And then it helped when probably around 12:30, when the baby was getting really close, I was able to feel his head. I could feel all his hair. It was the craziest thing, but it gave me that other extra like oomph to really dig deep and push through, because at that point I was exhausted, so tired. And then I knew I was really close when the doctor finally like put on his little like stuff, got like the tools out or whatever, like the thing to put on the bed, because I was still in the room that I had been in since Thursday night, and for most of the time I was pushing, the doctor was just in like his scrubs and like a fleece vest, like so laid back, just kind of chilling with like a glove on, just kind of like checking things out. But once he put on his gear, I was like, all right, we're so close, let's just do this. And I remember being so just uncomfortable, like the way I was positioned, because the whole pregnancy my left hip like just killed me. So it was funny kind of during labor how much my left side really hurt, and I think that was because of how the baby was positioned like in there. I think he definitely favored the left side, so I couldn't really even put my left leg down when I had breaks between contractions and breaks between pushing, because it just hurt so bad. And then there was one time when the nurse was like, all right, let's try something a little different. She gave me a towel to hold on to, kind of like tug of war, and tried to use that to help push, give a different angle, different type of leverage. But the baby did not like that at all. His heart rate kind of dropped a lot. So we're like, all right, let's not do that, but let's get into gear and really push this baby out because he's ready to go. And they told me right then and there, they're like, because you've been pushing for so long, we need to take the baby right over to the warmer. We can't put him right on your chest, but we'll give him to you as soon as we can. We just want to make sure everything's okay. So I knew we were so close, and I was just so tired. I felt so weak. I felt like I couldn't do it, and they just kept telling me like, give this your best push, you're so close, you're so close. And I felt like they were saying that for hours, you know. But finally, at 12, nope, to 1:45, I'm totally off with my times. Oh my gosh, he was born at 1:45 a.m. So not 12, but like 1 o'clock a.m. was when stuff was like really starting to happen. All right, that's better. But around 1:45 is when he finally made his entrance into the world. So I remember like feeling his head kind of come out, but then his shoulders kind of got stuck, so it wasn't like he came out in one big push. But once he got his head out, and once the doctor got his shoulders out, they took him out, and he cried right away. And I think I was just in shock. Like, I was just like, did I really just do that? Like, did I really just give birth to a baby? I was just so tired and just so overwhelmed by everything. And so my husband was still standing next to me, and they took the baby over to the warmer, and I told my husband, like, you can go with the baby, but you know, I was still like spread eagle, like they were trying to get the placenta out of me, and that was a little bit trickier than I thought it was going to be. It probably took like 15-ish minutes or so for them to get the placenta out. I had to push a lot. The doctor had to do a lot of like whatever he did to help get things out. But once the placenta came out, he did a couple stitches just because I had some very minor like lacerations, I guess, like on the outside, but I didn't tear, thankfully. I was so scared I was gonna tear. So by the time the placenta was out, they were ready to bring my little baby over, Lincoln David, over, put him on my chest so I could hold him for the first time, and it was so beautiful and special. And I'm just so thankful that everything with him was okay. He was just so healthy. He was 20 inches long, 7 pounds, 13.5 ounces, and just so beautiful. And he had so much hair. At that point, it was just a really special time of holding him, tried to nurse him for the first time, and just it was so special. I still can't believe, like, those moments. It just felt so surreal. Like, I couldn't believe looking at him and being like, we made this, like, to my husband, saying like, this is our baby. Like, how crazy. So after I held him for a little bit, the nurse took him again and took him over to the sink and gave him a bath for his first time. My husband was there with him throughout all that, and she did the vitamin K drops in his eyes, and he also got the hepatitis B injection, I believe, at that time. So they did that pretty quickly, and then I was able to get him back. I still hadn't gotten up and out of bed, but they brought me food, and I went to town on that because I was starving. But overall, I felt pretty good. I think the adrenaline at that point had kicked in, and I was just feeling like a rock star. But because the hospital was still so busy, I wasn't able to get out of bed for a couple hours. And I remember sitting in bed being like, I'm legitimately going to piss my pants. Like this, I was like shaking my legs being like, I'm gonna pee, like I'm gonna pee right now. They had never put in a catheter when I got the epidural because things moved along so quickly right after I got the epidural. So I hadn't peed. I mean, I peed a little bit during pushing, but you know, whatever. So I hadn't like gone to the bathroom, I hadn't gotten up, nothing like that. But they needed to have 2 nurses in the room before I could get up, just standard procedure. But they were tied up with another patient, so I was just anxiously waiting. But finally, I think around 3:30 probably, I was able to get up. I felt super weak, but it felt so good to get up, and I could go to the bathroom, which wasn't as terrifying as I thought it was going to be, probably because I didn't tear. But you know, they gave me the little squirt bottle and used that and hooked me up with the awesome pads, and I was able to take a shower. So I felt like a new person once I was able to rinse the labor stuff off of me and be all clean. And so around 4 probably, I was all dressed and back in bed with the baby next to me, my husband on the couch, and we probably got 15 minutes of sleep. It was such a whirlwind that whole night, and just everything after the baby was born, everything just happened so quickly. And before we knew it, it was morning and guests were starting to come, and we were able to show off our little boy to the world. Now I will say, the one major downfall of the whole labor and delivery was the aftermath of my epidural. So I vaguely remember when they were taking out the epidural from my back after the baby was out, and they were getting me, you know, ready to get out of bed and stuff like that, that I felt like wetness hit my arm. Like the nurse kind of pulled out the epidural weird. So I'm not sure if that's when this happened or if when I was getting the epidural this happened, but I ended up getting a spinal headache because of the epidural. Somewhere in the whole epidural situation, my spinal cord, the fluid area was punctured, so I was leaking spinal fluid. Now, I didn't realize this for a couple days because I thought I had pushed for 3 hours, like all the tension in my shoulders and my neck. I just thought I was super sore and had like a tension headache. And I had so much adrenaline those next few days as well that I didn't really think anything of it, and neither did the nurses because I was still functioning. I was still getting up. I was on, taking the ibuprofen and Motrin, whenever I was allowed to take that. But I wasn't in like excruciating pain. I was still functioning. So let's see, Sunday rolled around, Monday rolled around. I still complained about having a headache, but it was nothing like severe. Then Monday night rolled around. This was supposed to be our last night in the hospital, and I remember waking up just sobbing, being like, something is not right. Like, this is not normal. Like, even though I was on the Motrin and Tylenol, like I was still in so much pain. Nothing was getting better. It was just feeling like it was getting worse. So the nurses ended up taking our son out with them so that my husband and I could get some sleep. But that really didn't even help me. I was struggling with nursing because I had to be looking down when I was nursing him, but it just hurt so bad every time I did that. So I was just a wreck. So Tuesday morning, the doctor that was on call or on the shift, whatever, came in and was like, all right, so I think you have a spinal headache. And this frustrated me so much because there had been so many nurses and doctors in and out the past couple of days checking on me and stuff, and no one came to this conclusion. Everyone was kind of just trying to push like, oh, you're fine, just drink some caffeine, blah, blah, blah. But it didn't really hit anyone until Tuesday morning that this was worse than anybody had thought. So that was really frustrating in hindsight, but it's just, hindsight 2020. But anyways, the stress from that just continued because to verify that I had a spinal headache and that I didn't have blood clots or anything crazy like that, they ordered an MRI for me. So there I go, down to the area where you could get an MRI. I remember them wheeling me through the hospital. I feel like I'm just so out of it, like sitting in the wheelchair, just like so just distraught and in pain and just scared because I was leaving my baby with my husband while I'm going to get an MRI, and then I'm laying in the tube. I had never had an MRI before. I was terrified. And of course you're in there for like a half hour with these loud noises, and I'm trying to stay calm, but I'm also freaking out inside thinking, oh my gosh, I have a brain tumor. I just had a baby. I'm not going to be able to raise my baby. Like, of course you have every thought in the world running through your head, and it was just so overwhelming. But thankfully, the MRI results came back and they said like there's definitely some swelling like in the I don't know, like the lower part of my skull. Like there was just some swelling, so they could tell I had a spinal headache, and they were like, all right, we're gonna do a blood patch. That'll probably solve it. So then a few hours later, again, they wheel me away from my baby and my husband, and they take me to another area where they get ready to do the blood patch. And the doctor just, because he has to, is reading off all the things that could go wrong with this, about how I could get like a blood infection and like another just freak out moment. I'm just like freaking out inside, being like, oh my god, like what is happening? Like I came into the hospital to have a baby. I did not expect to leave with pictures of my brain and this whole nightmare from the epidural. But thankfully they did the blood patch and I felt better in minutes. And so finally, after they did the blood patch, I had to lay low for about an hour or so just to kind of let things settle. And finally they were like, all right, we'll discharge you, you can go home. Finally. So we did all the paperwork, and I was still just so exhausted and out of it from the stress and just how overwhelming the whole day was. I mean, on top of all of the MRI, the blood patch, all of that, we were filling out paperwork for the birth certificate, having people come in to check the car seat, like so much. So I was so ready to go home, and thankfully about 7 o'clock that night, we got discharged and we went home. And I was so glad my parents were there, kind of just helping us pack up everything and helping us get through the last couple hours of the day, because it was just a lot. But finally got to go home. My parents came with us and they got Subway sandwiches for us. They had decorated our house and they watched the baby for a couple hours while we got a few hours of sleep in our own bed. And that's when the whole postpartum at-home adventure started, which at this point it's all a blur. And looking back, it definitely wasn't as hard as I thought it would be for the reasons I thought up front. But just the learning process is just a lot to do. But here we are about 8 weeks after all of that, and we're feeling more confident every day in our abilities to parent and raise this child, and we love Lincoln more and more every day, and it's just an amazing thing. And my husband's already ready to have more kids, and I'm like, slow your roll, like, do you remember what I just went through? But you know, it was really overall, despite it being such a long process, despite the whole epidural debacle, things went very well, and I'm very thankful that both Lincoln and I came out on the other side healthy, and we're both doing very well. And I'm just so grateful that even with all the drama with me, that he was healthy and like there was nothing wrong with him. And so at least I had that to hold on to, and I didn't have to stress about him. That is a lot. It's crazy to take a trip down memory lane to something that wasn't really that long ago, but it feels like it was forever ago. It feels like Lincoln has been a part of our family forever. He just fits in so perfectly, and I can't imagine living life without him, and I can't really even remember life before him. Mom life is a crazy thing.